a phenomenon, kind of a very random thing called TEDx. And kind of, I'm going to begin with that. And the story is, thanks to TEDx, I managed to get Melinda Gates. And I don't know, she has given quite a few TEDx talks, but one of her first TEDx talks was in the largest slum in Africa called Kibera in Nairobi. So how did that come about? So in 2009, on a fellowship, I was on an Acumen fellowship. I learned about TED and TED Talks for the first time. So I was sitting in this office in New York, and lo and behold, as part of the fellowship, there are a multitude of speakers who are coming to us, and Chris Anderson walks in through the room and talks about TED. Before that, I had no clue about TED or TEDx's. Actually, TEDx's I think did not exist. And Chris Anderson came and told us about TED, why he is, very passionate about the idea of spreading ideas. So you can imagine, I was a much younger person then. I was completely blown away by just this concept of spreading ideas. And someone has kind of decided to dedicate his life to doing this. And he left us with a parting gift, which is a CD of TED Talks. So, this is before the phenomenon that is TED Talks on their website took off. And I think I can track down the TED Talks I saw. And, we had the TED Talk about the school skill creativity, and I'm completely blanking on the name of the speaker.
Ken Robinson.
Sir Ken Robinson, yes. And there were a few of them, and I was completely blown away by this concept. And, if you guys have had the opportunity to either see his talks or meet Chris, a very unassuming, humble person, but has a brilliant vision of the world based on the simple concept that if you spread ideas, fantastic things can happen. So this was in New York, and part of the fellowship after my induction in New York, I moved to Nairobi. Now a little more context about that. I don't know, are you guys familiar with the African continent or anything to do with the politics of, especially Indians in East Africa?
Yeah.
Marcus is?
Yep. A bit. We just had a tour about Africa last week, actually. But
you guys did? Okay. So here, this is also like interesting stuff, right? So I grew up in India. So my entire life has been in India. Or as one of my mentors said, Suraj, you grew up in India, and then when you moved out of the country, you moved to Kenya. So you're kind of an emerging market specialist because all you know is emerging markets, right? You don't know anything else. Now, I grew up in India, and when I got this fellowship and I was told I was going to be placed in Nairobi, the average person who kind of had any idea about Africa would tell us that be worried, Kenya is a dangerous place, Nairobi can be scary. Until someone in my family actually met someone who asked my family, where did your brother grow up? It was my sister actually. And she said, no, he's grown up in India. And he said, he'll be completely fine. Indians reaching Nairobi, they'll handle themselves. So I get there to find out that there is this kind of huge animosity between the Black Kenyans and the kind of Kenyan Indian community. Now, it so happens that the Indians moved to East Africa in the early 1900s. The British actually got us there to help build the railways. So they transported a bunch of Indians living in east of India to the East Africa, so West India to East Africa. Now, there is this animosity, and lo and behold, I was sent to Nairobi to actually build public toilets. Now, and build public toilets in low-income communities. So, again, I think I didn't mention this. I'm an engineer by training, right? So before I jumped into the social sector, I actually did my engineering in computer science, and I worked briefly in the tech industry before moving to the nonprofit side. So here I am, an Indian, working in the slums of Kenya, where traditionally, kind of, if you see anybody of Indian origin, there is a level of mistrust because in most Black Kenyan minds, the Indians are the ones who run businesses, and they basically extract all the money and they don't treat their workers well, and that's the kind of story in their head. And I've kind of reached there And kind of I have to figure out a way to help this small company that is building public toilets. And they're a for-profit company which has a unique kind of build, operate, and transfer model, which usually in the Western world you apply to massive infrastructure projects. Is being applied to building small public toilets so that people have a convenient facility to go to the bathroom when they want to. Now, I'm not going to get into the sanitation part of it as of now. Now, while I was doing this, I was spending a lot of time with young Kenyans. I would sit in these public toilets, as part of understanding the market, understanding who the customers are. I've had many, many strange expressions where people come, to the toilet block and take out their 5 shillings. By the way, there, just to make sure that, people don't overuse the toilet paper, when you pay for it, that's when the person sitting at the counter hands out toilet paper. So I've had so many people who get shell shocked, they're shopping, they're on their way, they'll hand out their 5 shillings and there is this Indian man handing out toilet paper. Now, anyways, I did a lot of that. And during this time, I found out that there are a lot of these young people, incredibly smart people, right? And many Kenyans, as you would meet them, they're pretty well read, they've gone to school, but they don't know what to do next because of literally the lack of ideas of what they could do with their future. So that's where this kind of idea was born of, hey, like what Chris Anderson told me, can we just share ideas? And I ran my own little pilot to understand this. So again, I'm talking about 2009, guys. I'm sure all of you have now heard about microfinance, right? Which after Mohammed Yunus of Grameen Bank won the Nobel Prize, microfinance, almost everybody knows about it. And the kind of, on one level, the circle of expats or social sector professionals that I was hanging out with, everybody knew about microfinance. But when you go to the slums of Kenya, in Nairobi, rural areas, many people just didn't have an idea that they could take a small loan to improve their life. So I kind of asked a bunch of these, do you know about microfinance? Nobody knew this. So the original idea was, can we host an event where this is not going to be a marketing event where a microfinance company is going to talk about their product. It's not going to be about, someone pitching a particular product, but an event where people will come and share ideas so that everybody benefits. And it's during this time that I heard suddenly I was trying to reach out literally to TED for, hey, I just had that CD. So again, remember back in technology days, like you have to find a laptop, a projector, how do we do it? So I was reaching out to TED and I found out that they have something called a TEDx event. Now, I applied for a license. I genuinely believe, and Nikki, don't throw me under the bus by reaching out to TED and sharing the story. I genuinely think the person who was reading the application, guys, I don't know if you know this, you have to write a pretty intense application of why you want to host a TEDx. And I talked about Aslam. They didn't know what Kibera was, right? But it was very early days. So they said, fine, anybody wants to host an event, take a license. Because I flouted every single guideline they have. Nikki might have seen photographs. They're so particular about the logo, the colors. I made the TEDx banner by hand, and thankfully we are doing this and you don't see my handwriting. It's not great. And I can send you pictures or you'll find it online. The most crappiest TEDx probably done in the world that I did. But the main goal was to spread ideas. Anyway, fast forward, we had a wonderful event. About 50 people showed up in this church in a slum because that was the only space we could kind of rent out. Yes, you can rent out churches in slums as a space. And we did our little TEDx. And, fast forward, TED came to know about it. And they were pretty excited about this. And then began this journey of this entire branch within TED that focused on what they call TEDx's in developing communities and developing countries. And we kind of had scholarships for young people who were in these communities to come and attend TED, get a feeling of what TED is. We worked with IDEO to kind of build TEDx in a box. Nikki, I don't know if you remember all these days. These were in the kind of, now when I think back, they're almost a decade old. And then, we had these TED events where I got to TED Global and all these TEDx organizers would come together. And I was so amazed by not only, of course, the energy, but the thought that people were putting into hosting their TEDx's. So again, Nikki and I have had lots of fun conversations where you just hear about what he's done with Salzburg, with TEDx's, how he's kind of built the community, and we take these ideas back. And from there, which is that what does bigger look like for this TEDx Kibera? So we grew it to many other slums, right? And once I got many other people thinking about this, and I think what I wanted to stress on was, if you look at TED as a concept, you think it's a very Western idea, if you may, right? Just thinking about who started it, but now has incredible global relevance, right? Through TEDx's, when we got in touch with the Gates Foundation, we got access to some of the best thinking when it comes to development, right? And through the Gates Foundation support, we could bring those ideas uh, to Kibera. And lo and behold, a few years later, Melinda Gates decided like, hey, they want to kind of do this entire year with TEDx Change. It was called TEDx Change, CHANGE, around the world. And one of the first places they picked was to do it in Kibera, because they also completely agreed with, hey, if we are having a conversation around development, how many times are you going to have this conversation amongst people who, yes, can help, but in some ways it does not directly impact their lives? So how do we take these conversations directly to the folks, the people who are involved and whose development we're working towards? So I think that was like a big kind of moment of realization for me, which was, hey, if a bunch of us can actually get together, who kind of, hey, who is this? Is this Nikki?
Marcus.
Hey, Marcus, thank you. Yes, this is one of our speakers. And if you can look at the signboard behind,
yeah,
and that by the way, for these events, we modified the community guidelines, because when I was speaking to TED, I said, hey, if you really want to encourage young people in many of these communities, you can't have these strict guidelines. You need to have and create this space where they can feel as part of the community, right? Another example, many of the youth in these slums, for them, when they're kind of applying for jobs, sorry, I noticed that many TEDx organizers are inherently such beautiful souls who network, who know how to make connections. We have Nikki here who has brought us together, right? He knows that it comes naturally to him. But this is not how many youth in the developing world think. For them, a certificate is important. Again, TED was extremely generous. They would say, hey, you want certificates? Here you go. We'll print certificates and bring them to you. So that now suddenly many of our TEDx organizers, right? By the way, our budgets were minuscule, right? I think we were doing entire events in like less than $200 for 70 people or 80 people. So it was not the budget, it was the spirit of it. And we had someone like TED who once understood it. They were backing it up. They were willing to learn, willing to change, willing to modify things so that this particular idea has much more global relevance. So that has given me phenomenal inspiration, if I may say so, that if someone is willing to do the work of bringing all these ideas that, hey, have shown to be relevant in one sphere, and here I'm using that sphere as, hey, it works in the developed world, it could very easily work in the developing world too. So quickly jumping kind of gears, and this is where I think I can connect with what I think Marcus was saying about schools, because my latest battle is with schools in India. So when I was thinking of, I went through my own, I don't know if it's like an early life, midlife crisis, or like Odete says, she wanted to kind of pursue her own dream. I also wanted to kind of start my own thing. But more importantly, I spent 8 years in East Africa, in Nairobi. And midway through my time there, I was enjoying myself. I was learning a lot. I was growing professionally. But I joined the social sector because there are so many social issues in my country of India. I think many of you might be aware of it, if you read the news. And I was like, what am I doing in Africa? Yes, this is great, but there are 1 billion people back. That was kind of what got me into this journey. So I started wondering about what's going to take me back. And similar to Odete, I was like, hey, I knew that it's not the solution I need to be married to. So what is this massive problem that's going to keep me motivated for the next couple of decades of my life, because I didn't see myself leaving it. So the problem I picked is the problem of non-communicable diseases. So as most of you might again know, that one of the biggest health challenges facing the world right now is non-communicable diseases. And there are 5 major risk factors. There is drugs, there's alcohol, there is just the environment, and then there is lack of exercise or lack of activity and lack of good nutrition. Now, the last two, they have pretty easy fixes. You can be more active and you can eat better, but they're not easy, right? And you know it's not easy by the multitude of health startups that exist. So what I'm doing is I run a company called CoolCoach, where we're literally trying to bring the best of what is there in fitness that the world is figuring out to some of the most poorest and underserved communities in India. And we've started off with, we realized when we kind of did our little analysis that, hey, you have to catch them young. So we work a lot in schools. So we are revitalizing the physical education period. So Marcus, that's why I said, we have a lot. I totally agree with what you said. So in an Indian school, go and talk about physical education, or it's completely vanished because there's such academic pressure. The people think that you don't need to move, you know. So that's what we do. Sorry?
Same with us.
Yeah.
That's why the UK is getting fatter and fatter and fatter.
Everyone is. And a small twist, and this is connected to my learnings with what I did with TEDx is, hey, if you create an opportunity for young people, they can grow and learn. So what we do is, in India, there is a huge talent gap. So we pick youth who have played at the state or national level in some sport. Unfortunately, in India, if you've played at that level, but you come from a low-income family, very often, if you don't really make it in cricket, which is the most popular sport, you have no career. So you kind of go into a daily wage job. The news is peppered with stories of our Olympic level athletes who die in poverty. So we take these youth who have performed at the national level, give them some training, and during the 1-year program that we have, we place them at a low-income school as a physical education coach. So Marcus, we avoid the problem of them teaching theoretical stuff because most of these youth don't know any theory. But what they know is to move very well. They understand sports. They thrive on the ground, not in front of a laptop. So we ensure that all these skills have a very kind of functional fitness like workouts, sports, games to kind of get them more active. And at the end of our training program, we place all these youth in the growing fitness industry in India, where they can begin their careers and hence create an income for their parents. So anyway, I taken my time about 20-25 minutes, and I know we have halfway through what we had to do. So just two stories. One, my experience with TEDx, which taught me that, hey, a group of people completely disparate, the TED team sitting in New York, TEDxers sitting around the world, and me, an Indian, trying to do something in kind of in Kenya, where I was not most welcome. That's possible, which allowed me to think of, hey, what are these other fantastic ideas available around the world, which if I focus on the execution part of it, trying to bring it to some of the most underserved communities, it could change the world. So I'm going to leave it at that. And then maybe we'll, as Nikki said, keep it open and have a conversation.
I love it. And it's so interesting that wherever we are and at whatever time in history we are, we feel like we have everything and everything is being invented and built and created. But then something pops up like TEDx, or something pops up like Moonshot Pirates, where I'm at right now, and sees that there is still so much room left to follow your dreams and expand globally. I love your stories. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to open it up for everyone. Share your stories. Share what you think about holding back versus expanding out. Most of the people in the room have experience or had a touch point with the TEDx community, which is nice. It's kind of a almost family meeting here.
Suraj, how do you do it now with the pandemic going on, and it's in India? It's very severe. Is it something that you can still continue now you're in Spain, or is it? How do you do it?
Great question. So April 1st was when most of the youth we work with, and there were about 12 remaining because others all got placed and had taken up jobs. They were April 1st where they're going to begin their first jobs at gyms and as fitness trainers. That was one. March 17th was, we were hosting CoolCoach Games, our second edition in Pune, one of the cities in India, which is like a fitness competition for kids when this kind of COVID crisis happened. And in India, in fact, the gyms and fitness centers were asked to close down even before a national lockdown was announced. So it was kind of a double whammy for us because, we could not end on a high note with the students as well as most of the youth, it took a lot of convincing from our side to convince these youth and their parents to kind of give this industry a chance. Just because, again, a little bit of history, Kyra. When I started, I thought slam dunk. These youth, they have no career prospects. The fitness industry is growing. We're going to create a career pathway for them. What more? This could be amazing for them, and this is like will allow them to play. What we, in hindsight, we didn't get as much interest because most of these youth don't know that the fitness industry and the sports coaching industry is actually growing. Because many of these youth don't enter the kind of expensive boutique fitness gyms or a Gold's Gym that I was thinking of creating employment opportunities for them. So it was after 1-2 years of convincing, holding their parents and them along, and their future prospects like vanished overnight. So schools initially we were not too worried about, because in India we were going into summer vacation. So it was like, hey, we'll start our work again once schools reopen. So first, let me tackle the youth question. So we were very worried and we didn't want to leave our youth hanging dry. So we started our own kind of online fitness training service and kind of with employing them. So now, almost every fitness trainer worth their salt is doing it around the world. But I wish I had pictures for this, and I'm happy to send them, Kyra. I'm talking about youth who, we were preparing them for the job of a floor trainer at a physical space. And now suddenly you have to do video calls with Zoom. And it's like the first video call, again, if you can imagine a small house in India, suddenly your aunt, your grandmother, everybody wants to peep in, and while you're doing a call, your father is shouting instructions like, I told you to buy this, move your ass. And we're like, no, guys, this is, if you're going to take an online fitness session, you need to have space. They don't have space. How do you create the space? So now for the youth, we have kind of created our own online fitness training, and everything was done online. We couldn't meet them. And so it was from hand-holding them to say, hi, hello, how to make soft talk, small talk while training someone. And now we are about 100 clients across 10 countries, in fact. And these guys in their small houses, last month, most of them made close to $200. So while most of their peers do not have a job, so that's one part. The schools, unfortunately, we started again, once the academic year started in June, we started trying to reach out to them. And this is one of those cases where, we never kept the contact details of the students we were working with, because we would interact with the schools directly. And the moment the pandemic hit, lockdown happened, our only contact point was the school principal. Now, this is also because of reasons of, there are strict laws against, the possibilities of child sexual abuse, collecting data and details, and we didn't want any of that. It's a kind of a risky place to be at. So when we contacted schools, these were early days, and most parents of the children we work with were in dire straits. So even when the school principal would call them and saying that, hey, if you're doing online classes, and they were getting shouted upon by these parents saying that, listen, we don't have food to eat right now, and you're worrying about me filling data and giving the phone to the child kind of thing. So in this pandemic, we've kind of kept away from directly providing any kind of fitness training to students for the first 4 or 5 months, just understanding this context. What we did start, we said that, hey, who among these young students would be most motivated to do it, right? Because imagine most of them are not used to being, fitness as a part of their day. So now we've created sports-specific programs. So we have a bunch of footballers. We know footballers. We said, hey, you're footballers. You know the importance of fitness. Do you want to get fitter during this lockdown? And we'll create workout programs that you can do in your house as long as you have a smartphone. And of course, we had to be biased towards children who had smartphones. So now they have borrowed their parents or brothers, elder brothers, sisters' smartphones. We have a program for sports specific, and they use the exact same app that our other clients are using, and we train them online. So that is slowly taking shape, and that's what we are planning to do for the next 6 months, which is just focused on these these young students who play sports. And our hope is once schools reopen, we're again bullish on next June, next academic year, that we'll have in each school, we'll have at least the sports people talking about the importance of fitness and, doing a squat and a push-up properly and, having your core tight. And that's what we're doing. So again, to summarize, with the youth we trained, we have created an online training kind of business for them so that they can get clients and they're training using Zoom and Google Meet, sitting in their homes. And for the children, we just have a very small program which is sports specific. I hope that answers your question.
I think it's an idea worth spreading.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So where to next for you?
For me,
yeah.
Personally, first father, mid-Jan. I think the world is going to turn upside down for me. So that's pretty exciting. But I'm also guessing you asked me work specifically. So
I was just meaning, so if we were to meet you in 10 years' time,
yeah,
what would you love to be saying when Nikki asked you to introduce yourself? How would you like to be introducing yourself as to what you'll be up to and all this sort of stuff?
Oh, I mean, so I think that's pretty easy. So one, I think if you look at just schools across India have a thriving fitness and sports curriculum. So that's one, and I don't know why I said just India, because we have dreams of going. So kind of in as many countries as we operate around the world, that this is just a foregone conclusion.
Just
the second piece,
just to help, there must be 1.3, 1.4 million schools in India.
You're right.
I'm not a bad guess then. So, I mean, that's a shitload of schools.
Absolutely. So when I say it's a foregone conclusion, if you look at the upwardly mobile Indian today, the average middle class, and I see it in my own family and kind of family friends and friends of friends, your fitness, your health is connected to your fitness and your nutrition. People are well aware of it. So this, I'm talking about a good 200 million people in India are aware. I'm not saying we're practicing it, we are anywhere close to it, but that awareness has spread, right? I'm at a stage where my uncles and aunts in their 70s now come to me and ask, hey, so do you think we should be watching our, food intake, what should we be doing? So that has changed. So when I say the fitness curriculum is part of it, Marcus, I should also add the Indian government being pretty, at least forward thinking right now, and maybe for very different reasons. We now have a national health curriculum for schools. So I'm guessing with the growth of non-communicable diseases, the fact that such a policy exists, that we're going to see major shifts. So I don't mean to pretend in 10 years that CoolCoach, which is the organization I'm heading, would be solely responsible for it. But I think, hey, so that when I say that we would have played a huge part in it, because right now we're the only players talking about it, at least in the education space. The second piece is, we work with youth, and one of the learnings I've had, whether it was my time in Kenya, before that, even now, is we have a lot of talented people. And right now our focus is on what we call kinesthetically gifted youth, who are written off in my country. Now, these, just because they actually are very good in the field, they didn't get, as you put it, they had to cram some numbers and some figures, and they were not able to regurgitate that on an exam paper. They're basically seen an idiot. And I'm sorry, I've been in some of their homes and I've seen these young boys and girls basically get verbally abused by their own parents, saying that you're an idiot, you're a good for nothing. And I seriously hope by creating this pathway where you've done well sports, you are kinesthetically gifted, you are a strategic thinker. If you can have a basketball at one end of the court and see a play and score a point, I think those talents are recognized, and a huge group of Indian, globally almost, men and women, that pathway is set. And if CoolCoach succeeds in making that change, I think those two things will be a highlight. The third piece, which I'm passionate about, is given my time with Acumen, I think we can have a profitable, a sustainable social enterprise, and that's something that we're working towards at CoolCoach. So if we can genuinely have a social enterprise that is creating large amounts of impact, but is also sustained by its own revenues. Now, if I crack that, now that is something that I'm really personally also motivated towards. So those three things, I think, will be my top three. Marcus, sorry, I hope I answered your question.
Well, you sort of have, but I was expecting you to say, I want to be a politician and I want to be the next prime minister, or
Cricket player.
or I want to quickly with my wife build a cricket team. We're starting 9 months at a time.
Suraj, I have a
That would take me
question.
10 years.
You're a global earthling. You know people, you've met people. When you look at the world, how it's developing right now, and the roles that the continents, if there is such a thing, have established, what's your personal vision, foresight, when you look at India, when you look at China, when you look at Africa, and you compare these three to America and Europe? And I know we have more than these, but kind of the main player are these five.
Sorry, could you expand a little when you say my perspective on how the world is going to evolve, or?
Yeah, so it's when we look into the roles of the country, of the continents, right, or the countries, because China is not a continent, of course. In terms of development, in terms of innovation, in terms of the term, the NBU, the next billion users, in terms of the question how much developing countries will either adapt to the formulas that developed countries have established, or develop their own that will be probably far ahead of the curve when you look at what the development countries have established, which is a conversation that I've been participating several times when we look at interfaces, for example, but that goes very deep. I'm just curious about the very broad analysis or foresight.
Okay, so from so what I see and what little I know, and just let me paraphrase that, is just based on my understanding, is the developed world right now, I think they had the benefit of having these different revolutions, if I may call it, right, spread across time. They kind of had the Enlightenment, the Renaissance, you had the scientific revolution, you had the technology revolution, then you had this kind of a women's empowerment movement, democracy in between all of that, and that kind of were staged. And when I look at what's happening in India, when I look at even in some ways Africa, I've never visited, nor my understanding of China is, actually I've not even read a lot of books. So let me keep China aside for this kind of analysis. But both India and East Africa and Africa, where I've spent time, all these things are happening together. And I think one that's creating a lot of, I wouldn't say confusion, but it's creating a lot of unnecessary I'm not getting the right word here. We're having a lot of extraneous events because people just don't understand it. A particular situation can be analyzed from the perspective of, hey, this is actually an impact of new technology, or is it impact of kind of new gender roles? Is this the impact of, like in India, the kind of caste system for many people may not be fast enough, but in the last 70 years, we've made lots of progress on that front also. So there are too many things happening, right? So that's kind of the general idea. Now, that's what I see, sorry. Now, I'll tell you first what my fear is. My fear is, I see a lot of polarization also, like what you said, this kind of, there is this Western world, there's a developed world, and there is this developing world. And there is this kind of, I think, need to assert ourselves. So I see that in some Indians, I see that in some Kenyans and Africans I've met, which is kind of, hey, we are better off, we are better than them, we are whoever that them is. And I don't see that is a recipe for a good future. But rather, I think if all of us can develop the understanding of, hey, there are problems and now there are solutions everywhere. And what is the best possible solution? And if you're not concerned about whether the solution came from, Mozambique or Malaysia, or Switzerland, and we all get to a place where we can implement the best solution, I think that's what I would want to get to. What I see in the next 10 years is, I think a lot of, I think all these countries are fighting for their own kind of independence in this kind of innovation space to prove, because, India wants to prove that we are as innovative as a country. We are more than just being the back office of the world. I don't know, off late, if you've seen, we are getting into manufacturing in a big way. thanks to this the trade wars, we are developing our capacities to be, build mobile phones and, television sets, to be a manufacturing hub of the world. I see this similar kind of actions in Africa also. So I think that needs to happen for a bit. But overall, sorry, I'm just trying. I'm going to read that comment in a minute. But my feeling is that in the next 5-7 years, that will calm down, and we'll get to a place where the best idea wins, and people will be just hungry to make sure that the best idea is implemented wherever you're, whichever part of the world you're in. Again, sorry, I don't know if I've been very articulate in my answer.
I have a question. What is your experience with the long or middle term impact of the TEDx, what you have organized?
Long or middle of the TEDx's that I've organized, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that the long-term impact, and this is the communities, the TEDx communities that I worked in, the youth especially, who are like part of the organizing team, was their realization that, hey, by hosting this event, right, they automatically had something in common with lots of other people in the world. And that commonality was actually a great card to start a conversation and take a relationship forward. I think just that idea is one of the long-term impacts of these TEDx's. Because what happened with the crew that we were doing TEDx Kibera, I don't know, Nikki, if you remember Kevin, who was there at, who was one of my co-organizers from Kibera, who had come to some of these TED events. He's come to Long Beach also. Now, many of these youth carried that knowledge and understanding forward, and they were able to use that to kind of forward their careers. And I've seen that kind of simple idea spread, because they were like, hey, how did you meet this person? So they're from a slum community. How do you know this person who runs a company, or is a technologist, or runs a startup in the rest of Nairobi? And they said, hey, we met at a TEDx. So that idea that, hey, you can have a common point, you can meet, have a conversation. So I see TEDx's, what I did, as a kind of an equalizer, as a conversation starter. So that's kind of, I think, one of the long-term benefits of doing it. The other more specific benefit, and this is my realization, one of the things that when you're from India and you realize when you go abroad, there is this stereotype of the Indian or the third world country where nothing happens on time. Have you guys heard that? Are you aware of it?
Just like Spain, right?
Don't tell me. I am learning it now, and I can't.
Mañana,
So you have this, and when I was organizing this, I realized that very often time is as a coordinating device. So many of the youth we were working with, the first couple of times I struggled, right? We would decide, and they'd be like, okay, we'll start at 9, and people will start walking up at showing up at 10, and then it's only when these youth were given the responsibility to organize themselves, they realized that time helps in coordinating. Time helps in kind of making people come together, do work, and create something. So that was a huge lesson the organizers of these TEDx's learned, right? Because once they had the responsibility of putting an event and they saw all of this happening, and I think many of us learn it, if based on where we are, if we go to the kind of colleges and schools that teach us these skills, we learn this. So that was the other thing that I've learned. So I bring that to kind of heart when I do CoolCoach, because as I said, we work with youth who are like sports players, who operate in India where no sports competition also happens on time. Now, I don't try and lecture them on timeliness, or we create projects for them and ask them to deliver it. The first 2 times they'll fail massively, and that's part of the process. 3rd, 4th time, punctuality becomes a part of who they are, because they realize that, hey, being punctual actually allows me to deliver on work. So that has been also a change. The lesser, of course, benefits or impact has been the conversations, the ideas themselves. I've seen a lot of them a lot of our audience start interacting with the idea. So for example, like it's as simple as microfinance, as simple as, hey, there are these organizations that provide training. So they're kind of micro level impact, which were more individual, but that has happened based on ideas shared on those TEDx stages. I should also add that I stepped out from my kind of TEDx ambassador role because of the simple reason that I want to make sure that other people also got that opportunity. And TEDx Kibera happens to this day in a much smaller way, which actually I love because people have taken it, it's their event, and they do it the way they want to do it, which I think is pretty fantastic.
Really
Martin?
quickly, sorry.
No.
Really quickly, like how are the toilet programs working? I just recently watched the Bill Gates documentary on Netflix, and one series was, particularly about Bill Gates Foundation trying to establish like toilets across Africa. Do you know how it's going? And
I can give you in a nutshell what happened. So, I was working in sanitation before it was really sexy. Okay, so I was working in a time when Bill Gates was not involved in it. If you told anybody you're going to work on toilets, everybody laughed at your face and they thought it was cool, right? So there are lots of interventions happening in the sanitation space. So one is just building stuff, right? So if you look at one of the challenges is most of the developing countries don't have cities don't have sewage systems. And especially when you go into slums or, unorganized living structures. So one is, how do you create solutions to manage the waste if there are no sewage systems around, right? And here, the numbers are staggering. Again, I hope nobody is eating food or nobody is thrown away by this. Each of us generates about 250 grams of poop on average every day. And if you kind of run the numbers, that's just a massive amount of stuff. Now, the economics of the system is, hey, you're consuming food, you're putting it out in the world. That needs to be taken someplace where it's processed. And hopefully, the cost of transporting it from where you poop to where it's processed can be borne by someone. Most governments around the world, especially in the developing world, are not able to do it. So they're trying different models of doing it. So in Kenya, after building public toilets, I also worked with a Swedish startup where a Swedish architect developed a system where you can poop in a bag, and that bag actually turns into the poop into fertilizer, and you can use it to plant crops. So there are a lot of interventions happening right now. Everything is in a very, very early stage. And the biggest challenge actually with sanitation in the Indian context and also in the African context is less to do with technology, it's to do with behavior change. So there are many behaviors when it comes to sanitation. And if you guys are interested, I'll send you a list of books on this to kind of get an understanding of it. It's behavior change. So a small example, in India and many rural communities, literally this idea of having a bathroom inside of your house is against what they believe in, because your poop is not clean, it's dirty, it has to be away from the house. So we are still struggling with those kind of ideas because the Indian government has built lots of toilets, but nobody's using them. So there are a lot of behavior change issues that to be dealt with before we can make a serious move. But I think the Gates Foundation and them reinventing the toilet, them bringing a lot of attention to it makes a lot of sense. Two more pieces of trivia for you guys. Do you know there is a WTO? There is a World Toilet Organization. And by the way, World Toilet Day is November 19th. We just passed it. There is a World Toilet Day.
We passed it.
We flushed it.